Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Shia City Podcast. We're here with,
Sheikh Bilal.
we're in a new setup today. We're here at Beit al in New Jersey. How do you like it here?
It's New Jersey.
That sums it up. So, we're a little less than 2 weeks away from Ramadan, one of the most holy months. And I just wanted to know what are some practical tips that we should prepare for, I guess, for Ramadan. I mean, let's start off, I guess, like fiqh related. What are like the do's and don'ts?
Okay, so when it comes to fiqh of fasting, there are some important things to pay attention to. There are obviously what are called mufattirat as-sawm, which is those things that break your fast, and those are important to know. And we can go back to the Marajas, Rasala Amaliya and Islamic laws and research this information. But there are other factors that are kind of significant. One, for example, is the idea of paying attention to that it is wajib in this month to fast all 30 days.
Mhm.
So if, for example, let's say I choose not to fast on one of these 30 days, I can't, right? Because my default setting in this month is fasting. So if it happens that I'm not fasting, it has to either be because it's an excused reason, meaning that I'm sick or I'm traveling.
Mhm.
But if I'm not fasting and I'm not sick and I'm not traveling, I have to pay what's called a kafara. And that kafara is that I will have to make up that fast and I have to fast for 60 days in addition to that, or feed 60 poor people, or free a slave if I have one, which obviously isn't a factor.
Yeah.
So one of the important things is that people don't pay attention to is that in the month of Ramadan, fasting is not discretionary. It's not like I can choose like, oh, I feel like fasting today, or oh, I won't feel like I don't want to fast today. You have to fast. The same way, for example, 365 days a year, when it's time for Zohar, I have to pray, right? I don't choose, oh, do I feel like praying or do I not? No, it's wajib on me to do it and I have to do it. And the same concept, fasting for these 30 days is mandatory. I have to fast. And if I'm not fasting, it needs to be excused. And if it's not excused, then I have to pay a kafara and I've committed a sin.
Okay.
So sometimes people don't pay attention to that. They think like, oh, this is the month of fasting. If I choose to fast, then I fast. No.
Yeah.
You have to fast.
So when we're talking about traveling, is there any way to travel under 10 days and still keep your fast?
Yeah, you can. Traveling is not haram in the month of Ramadan.
Yeah.
You can still travel. It's better not to keep the fasts in this month. Think about it this way, right? Let's say, for example, I travel.
Okay.
I'm going to go to, for example, I don't
Chicago.
know. Okay, you got family in Chicago, so
I
maybe
do.
you want to go to Chicago. All
really
right,
do.
fine. I go to Chicago for 5 days, let's say.
Okay.
Is it haram? No, it's not. As long as I'm not going there to sin, travel is permissible for me.
Mhm.
And when I'm there for 5 days, because it's not my home, I can't fast there.
Yeah.
I still didn't commit a sin. I'm traveling, and Allah said, if you're in traveling, then fast from other days.
Yeah.
But think of it this way, right? That traveling that I'm going to make in that time period, and I won't fast for those 5 days. I have to make up those 5 fasts after the month of Ramadan.
Yeah.
Is it easier to fast when everybody's fasting,
Yeah.
or is it easier to fast when I have to do it alone?
Mhm.
So it's just adding a layer of complexity,
Yeah.
right? That makes it more difficult that you have to keep up with these things and make these fasts up. So which is why you can. It's permissible.
But you just can't fast.
Exactly. So if it's under 10 days, if I'm in a city for less than 10 days, then I can't fast in that city.
Got you. And then just last question. I heard something about if you consider a place your home, you can fast there. Like, how does that work?
So to consider a place your home, it has to be a place where either you've lived a part of your life or you are living a part of your life, and you need to live in that place for and so it's not like, for example, right? I bought a timeshare.
Mhm.
A timeshare you own for 2 weeks out of the year, for example, right? That's not my home. It's a property I own, but it's not considered my watan, my home, because I don't live there for a long period of time.
Mhm.
I can, for example, own multiple houses. I own one here, for example, maybe you own one in Chicago. But to consider that place your watan, one of the conditions that has to be met is that I've lived there continuously for a period of about 6 months where people recognize me as being a resident of that location.
Okay.
So if that hasn't happened, and I'm not staying in a location for 6 months at a time to build that relationship of this being my home base, I can own it, it's mine, but it's not considered my watan. To
Okay.
have a watan, to have a home base where I can fast and pray full, I have to live there for an extended period of time before I
Okay.
can consider it that way. So now, for example, I'll give you an example. For me, I now live in Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
right? I grew up in New York, and I lived for a very long time in New York. And my father still has a house in New York. And I consider the idea that I have the option always to go back to New York because I have a home there. Now what happens? I have two homes. Pennsylvania is my home. New York is my home. Because both of these are places where I've lived for an extended period of time. I have the potential to go back to New York whenever I want, and I can keep a base there. And I have my house in Pennsylvania where I live all the time. So those are two places that so it is possible. You can have more than one watan.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible. But the conditions that you have to meet to get to that point in time is not simply just owning a piece of property. It's a little bit more complicated than that.
So I'll give you my example. I lived in Chicago for a year. I went to school there. I can consider that my
So they kicked you out.
something like no, but like my whole mom's side is there. I go probably every other month.
But there's no place there that you call your own, right?
Where I stayed, my uncle's house, I consider that a home.
But is there a space that's dedicated to you there?
Yeah, a bedroom.
But is that a guest bedroom or is that Ali Abdi's bedroom? So why is this practical, right? So for example, a girl, she leaves her house, she gets married, and she moves to her husband's house. That's her house now. Many times the conversations when she comes to her parents' house, isn't that her house? And that depends on the fact that in that house, does she have a dedicated space or is she a visitor in that house? So same thing in your situation. The house that you're talking about, is there a dedicated space that's yours or is that a visitor space and that you're a visitor in this house and you stay there? So for example, if there's a dedicated space there, so for example, there's something dedicated to, that's my room, my things, and only I use this room and it's only for me, then I have a dedicated space there.
Yeah.
Then I can consider it as a place that, for example, that I can pray, I can fast, I can do these things, I can have that consideration. But in the absence of that, right, for example, for most girls, when they come home to visit their family, they stay in a guest room or they stay in a room that, it's for them to use, but it's not necessarily their room.
Gotcha.
You follow?
Yeah.
So in that situation, I lived here. This was part of my life. This was something important to me. And it is. We're not saying that you're not associated with this. But if I had to ask, where's your home? Your home is with your husband. That's the place where you live, and that's your domicile.
Gotcha.
So in the same way, your domicile is Long Island. It's with your parents. It's in this dedicated place where your things are that you're associated with and you're known by. Not necessarily in Chicago.
Okay.
You follow my point?
Yeah. So the month of Ramadan, people use it for a lot of things. Losing weight, setting goals, achieving something. What are some tips to, achieve those goals?
So it is a good idea to set goals, right? Human nature dictates that it takes about between 21 days and 40 days to form a habit in your life.
Yep.
So some studies kind of specify and say that it's a period of 21 days. And then there are other studies that say it's about 40 days. When we take a look at the month of Ramadan, we're definitely hitting 21 days. So it is physically possible to build a habit in this month and to design a good developmental goal in this month is fantastic. And it's a great idea because you're already in a spiritual heightened state. You're feeling motivated. You're activated. You want to do things. That's great. There's two types of goals, right? There's one that I make in the heat of the moment. Today I'm going to pray 1,000 rakat. Imam Ali used to pray 1,000 rakat tonight. I'm going to pray 1,000 rakat tonight, right? People do that. And they set a goal.
Yeah.
But what happened with that goal? They didn't do any of the preparation for it. They have none of the practice for it. And now all of a sudden they're going to run up against something that's actually very daunting to achieve. And they're going to fall short and it's going to be exhausting. Many times for us, what we do is month of Ramadan starts and then we start talking about the idea of setting a goal. And then it's like, this month I'm going to, read the Quran 10 times or I'm going to, pray tahajjud every night. I've done none of the prep work. And what happens then when I start trying to execute that goal, it's too much for me. So which is why it's great that we're having this conversation early, that now is the time to start setting goals and preparing for them. So for example, let's say I want to do tahajjud every night. That's a great goal. There's a couple of things I need to do before I get there, right? One is I need to learn what are the ahkam and responsibilities, what is the bare minimum I have to do, and what are the timings that I need to do it in. So for example, the best time for tahajjud is 30 to 40 minutes before Salat al-Fajr.
Okay.
Right? And the hour before Salat al-Fajr is the best time for tahajjud. Very true. And that's usually the time in Shahr Ramadan we're awake anyway, and we're stuffing our faces.
Yeah.
So yes, that exists, and there's a possibility that I can do it at that time. But if I only plan that I'm going to do it an hour before Fajr, and that's my time to eat, if I'm even a couple minutes off, then I have to choose between eating and praying. And what do you think a person is most likely going to choose? Eating. And what's going to happen? I'm going to miss my... So right now is when I plan. So I learned the ahkam that yes, that is the best time to do it. But according to Sayyid Sistani, I can recite Salatul Layl, Tahajjud, right after Isha, anytime. So technically I can do it before I go to sleep.
Yeah.
Then the other element is when you look at the ahkam of Salatul Layl, they can be pretty long. 8 rakat nawafil, 2 rakat shafa, 1 rakat witr. And the witr has 300 times al-afu. It has mentioning 40 mu'mineen's names. There's some really great things.
Yeah.
But to start, I need to know the bare minimum that, okay, fine, today if I'm not feeling up to it, or today if I'm tired, what's the bare minimum I need to do to make my goal work? So, which is why the idea, like, set goals, but educate yourself on how to achieve those goals. Ask for tips and pointers from people that, okay, if I want to achieve this, what are the things that I need to be doing? Let's say I want to finish the Quran twice in the month of Ramadan. That means I need to be reading 2 juz of Quran every day to do 60, right? Because it's 30 juz, 60. So I need to be doing at least 2 juz of Quran every day. Speaking to somebody who's done that, right? How do I prepare for that, right? And that's it. I need to spend an hour a day reading Quran. If not an hour a day, 2 hours a day, right? Because maybe in the beginning my speed isn't that great. Speaking to somebody who can help me achieve it might suggest and say, okay, fine. Turn on Manshawi or Sudais' recitation of Tartil, or even Abdul-Basit's recitation of Tartil. Open the Quran in front of you. Read as he's reading, so you're reading at his pace. And you can always pause and stop him and then make sure that if there's something I'm stuck on, I can fix. But at that pace of Tartil that I'm listening to, I can read faster than if I'm trying to read and pace myself, because what happens sometimes when you're reading Quran, if I don't understand it, it gets harder for me to read. I get stuck on certain words. My mind begins to wander. I become tired of going through the process. So again, using a tool to, right? A goal. I set a goal. I spoke to people. I got tips and ideas, and then I was physically able of achieving my goal. So same thing. Start planning your goals now. Start building out your resources, and be educated about the things that I can achieve and be reasonable. One of the ways that, by the way, that is a really good way to make sure you achieve your goal is write it down and put it somewhere that you see every day. Whether that's on my nightstand, I put it on a post-it note on my laptop, I put it on something that I'm going to interact with on a regular basis, so that when I'm down or when I forget or when I'm bored or when I have something going on, I can see my goal and go back to it. So it's really helpful in that sense too.
So speaking about the Quran, I know it's recommended you read the whole Quran in the month of Ramadan. Something I always get in a little banter with my mom. I always suggest reading the English version of the Quran just to understand it. But she's always like, no, just read the Arabic. What do you think is better?
So it's never one or the other. It's both. The reason the Quran is still in Arabic and unchanged in Arabic is because those are literally the exact letters and words that Allah chose to give us. So the consequence of that is that sticking to that, what Allah gave us, is the complete and entirety of the benefit that exists. When I come to English and I'm reading in English, I'm reading an interpretation of what this person thinks Allah meant when he chose those words. So I'm getting one of the potential meanings, but I'm not getting the entirety of the meaning.
Yeah, but not everyone is fluent in Arabic.
This is why the discussion is not to say that it's either this or that. It should be both. Why? So for example, the same way, for me to take an antibiotic, I don't need to know how that antibiotic works. I don't even need to know what's in it. I just need to make sure I take the pill. So in the beginning, that Arabic is that pill for you. That this is a medication for the spirit that Allah gave me, and he gave it to me exactly like this. This is exactly how I'm going to take it. But then this step 2 is I need to learn, what am I putting in myself? And that's where the English comes in. So it's not one or the other, it's both. Both should be a time investment. Both should be something that I'm developing and I'm working on.
Gotcha. So out of all the things you can do during Ramadan, what's one thing that you suggest everyone should do to spiritually grow?
So definitely attach yourself to the Quran. Reading one verse of Quran in the month of Ramadan is the equivalent in reward of reading the entire Quran any other time of the year. So, and that's it. You're spiritually heightened, your body's resonating with it. Another great thing is charity. Charity is something that, again, it doesn't take anything away from me physically in terms of my mental capacity, but I'm saving money on buying food, for example. And that's it. In the month of Ramadan is the best of charity. So these two things, that if I can kind of develop them, it's great to go in either directions. But guess what? There's a hadith when the Prophet was introducing the month of Ramadan to all the companions. And at the end of that speech, Imam Ali stands up and he says, "Oh Prophet, what's the best thing to do in this month?" And the Prophet tells him. So you don't have to listen to me. The Prophet has answered this question, right? And he says, don't sin in this month. Just don't sin. That's it. The beauty of it is, and the Prophet explains this, he says, this is that month in which your breath is like tasbih and your sleeping is like ibadat. So if I don't sin, I'm automatically golden. I'm already doing ibadat anyway. So it's like, instead of me focusing on other ibadat, let me just stay away from those bad things. And if I can stay away from those bad things,
you're good to go.
Right? It's amazing. It's beautiful.
So again, with Ramadan, some of the best nights of the year, Laylatul Qadr, are in that month. How do we take advantage of Laylatul Qadr?
Okay. So what's interesting is take a look at the structure of where Laylatul Qadr hits. And it hits in the final third of this month.
Yeah.
Right? So why? Well, Allah's mercy is so amazing that He says, I'm going to give you 20 days or 19 days to prepare for this. So you build a routine and the habit of getting into the process that fasting isn't your exhausting element. You're not tired after your fast. You're good by this point in time. By this point in time, by the 19th, the 21st, you're good, right? So if I've accomplished that, then it should be the process of one, preparing for the idea that, okay, if I'm already in this state, what are the other good things I can add on to this? Now, there's two ways that people typically do this. One is there's a checklist. And I need that checklist, and I'm going to go through that checklist, and everything that's on that list, I'm going to put a tick mark next to it.
Yeah.
That's okay. Some people need that, and that's great. But maybe, for example, for me, a checklist, instead of making me feel better and motivated, makes me feel horrible because I look at the checklist, I'm like, how am I going to do all of these things, right? So which is why it depends on the personality. Some people, that checklist is amazing. It's great. It's going to do wonders for you. It's going to keep you focused and guided, and you're going to accomplish something. And other people are going to see the checklist, and they're going to be like, nope, not happening.
Yeah.
My goal is figure out who I am, what is my personality, and build it around that process. If I'm a checklist person, great. Set up my checklist in advance, know what's going on. If I'm not a checklist person, there's two ways I can do it. One is show up in the masjid, and they say, okay, put the Quran on your head. I say, I'm putting the Quran on my head. They say, read this dua. I read this dua. And I go through the process, and I'm done.
Yeah.
Or two, I sit down, and I look at the amal of the night, and what resonates, I perform. And then I just make sure that I'm making ibadat of Allah any which way I can this night. The most important thing about the nights of Qadr is building that connection with Allah and turning back to Allah and acknowledging and recognizing that I have a relationship with God that I need to preserve. If I can get to that, these tools are tools to get me there. They're not the end all be all, right? My success is not that I open the Quran and I put it on my head. My success is that when I took the wasila of the Quran, I connected with Allah. So if my end goal is to connect with God, then these are tools to get me there, and I use whatever tools I need, but my end goal is I'm thinking about Allah the entire time. Yeah. You follow?
Yep.
So which is why different people will have different processes. There's no one solution to everybody. Everybody has a process, and giving them the freedom to employ that process is really important.
Yeah. So we heard a lot of ways to grow this month. What's the most unique way you can grow this month?
Okay, I don't know about the most unique way, but there are cool things that I've done that have been really fun, right? Okay. So one of the things that I do with my family, and we've done it for a number of years, is we do the Quran challenge. And what we essentially do is we all make a commitment that we're going to read the Quran in this month, and we make a deal that every juz that I read, everybody gets $1.
Okay.
Everybody puts in $30 into the pot from the start of the month.
From their own pockets?
Everybody.
Okay.
From their own pockets. You put in $30.
Okay.
Right? If the month ends, I get my money back. But if I didn't reach my goal, the money stays in the pot and gets split between everybody who finished the goal. So it motivates all of us then to read Quran. Yeah. And you can, there's ways you can modify this, right? So I can initially say I can only read 15 juz of Quran, or I can read 10 sparas of Quran. So I put in $10. Everybody puts in what their goal is. Yeah. And then at the end, whoever reaches their goal gets a piece of the pot.
So it's like halal gambling.
No gambling. It's a contest. Yeah. It's a musabaqah, right? So it's a contest between family members. And it's been we've done it with qaza namaz in this month. We've done it with recitation of Quran. Yeah. But why? Why is it a good idea? Because it motivates me and my family. It keeps us all working on the same goal together. We're all working towards this together. And then we have a little bit of a healthy competition amongst ourselves to kind of motivate us. Because if it's just you versus yourself, sometimes that can get tiring. You can get burned out. But when you're doing it together as a team, as a group, and same thing, you don't have to do it with your family. You can do it with friends. You can do it with relatives. You can do it with your mosque. But to create a challenge for yourself and to have these different ways of doing it together. One of the best things, right? Obviously, the Quran is amazing. But one of the things that Allah wants us to do is to be educated Muslims. So one of the unique things that you can do in this month, read a book. Read a book about Islam. Read a book about improving your relationship with Allah. Go through that process of self-education because that's the end goal. Yeah. Right? Ibadah without intellect is less valuable than ibadah with intellect, right?
Yeah.
So which is why Allah explains and he says, the scholar will be 70 degrees above the worshipper, where each degree, each level that he's higher, is the equivalent of a horse running for 1,000 years nonstop. And when they ask the Ahlul Bayt why, and it's because the scholar is knowledge about the religion such that he protects it and doesn't let innovation creep into it and protects it from the innovations of shaitan. And the worshipper is someone who just worships without thinking about things. So same thing. We're look, in the history of the world, this time period and this country, we have better access to knowledge and information than anyone in the history of the world.
Yeah.
Is it reflected? And that's what we have to ask ourselves. Are we really showing what access we have, and are we doing good things with it? And that's the question.
So coming back to your Quran competition, have you ever lost?
Yeah. So I've been doing this for, we started this back when I was in college and when I was starting out my career and when I was going through different things in life. And there are times where it's like, yeah, I didn't hit my goal.
Oh, wow.
I'm a human, like we all are. There's times when you don't hit your goal. But the question is what do? Do you stop playing? Do you stop saying, oh, I don't want to do this anymore? No. What you do is next year you push yourself harder. And there are years that, alhamdulillah, I met my goal and I did even better. You know, and then and I still set, you know, hard goals for myself, and I still try to push myself every year that if I have, right? The Prophet described it this way. He says, you're sitting at a table laid by Allah and you can take anything you want. So imagine, right? It's one thing you go to a restaurant, right? And a restaurant puts a menu in front of you. And from that menu, I can pick what I want to eat, but there's a couple of consequences to this. One, I got to wait.
Yeah.
So some things are going to take a while to get ready. And then two, I got to pay for it. So those are two natural hesitations I have from using a menu the way I want to. Versus here, Allah is saying the table's already set.
Yeah.
It's in front of you. There's no paying for it. There's no waiting for it. Take. Take as much as you can. So our goal in this month is that to mentally prepare ourselves and reach out as much as you can. Try. Even if you don't hit your goal, still try. Because that's what the goal of this month is, to take the beauty of this month and really push yourself and prepare for it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for all the advice.
I think it was a good time, good conversation.
Great conversation. I
Always
think I'm
fun.
ready for Ramadan.
All right. And that's it, right? Fasting in the month of Shaban is super rewarding. Like Imam Sadiq explains, and he says somebody who fasts one day in Shahr Shaban in this month gets the reward of heaven.
Let's just say I got heaven.
I make no claims. And
Yeah. Well, all right. Thank you for the amazing conversation.
always a good time.
Until next time.
Inshallah.